Who killed the king of pop? Next. Welcome to the Stan Simpson Show, a program about Connecticut people and compelling issues. I keep telling you, make it a point to drop in every week. It is no longer a question about if Michael Jackson was killed, but who killed him. The Los Angeles County Coroner's Office has ruled the King of Pop's death a homicide. Dr. Conrad Murray, Jackson's personal physician, is under heavy scrutiny. Toxicology reports found a combination of drugs caused Jackson's death. The question now is, who was more culpable, his doctor or Jackson himself? Entertainment attorney James Walker returns to talk about the latest on the Jackson front. In our second segment, we'll talk about men and marriage and why a provocative pastor says sex is very important. I didn't say it, he said it. And we'll wrap things up by talking sports with a sixth-time Connecticut Sportscaster of the Year, our friend Scott Gray from WTIC AM. But first, walk on MJ Encore performance here last week. So now the latest. It's a homicide.
It's a homicide.
Entertainment attorney, you took the family to task last week, said, you know what, they're a little too focused on finding things out and not on creating a legacy. What would you say to them now?
What I would say to the family now, Stan, is let the criminal process play itself out. But I would also say to the family, which has issued a statement that they want to go after people and now we want to avenge what's happened to our son and our uncle and our brother, I would say to the family, hold off, let the criminal process play itself out. Then I would say to the family, while that's going on, let's allow some of the scuttlebutt around us to die down. The Joe Jackson, the LaToya, the Jermaine, the tour, all of the nonsense with the lawsuits, the fights over the kids. I would say to them, allow the criminal process to play itself out while we work on the legacy of Michael Jackson. Because, Stan, think about this. If they bring a civil action, you remember the O.J. trial? We had the criminal action and the family, and the civil action against Dr. Murray, for example. And again, we want to emphasize, we don't know if he's charged. He hasn't been charged.
Right.
Exactly. So let's assume they bring a civil suit against him. Do you know, as a doctor, he probably knows everything about Michael Jackson in terms of living with him for months, in terms of being around him. Do you really want to put all of that on the stand in a civil trial?
How about this, Walk? To what degree did the family know about it? We're going to say that no one in the family, if indeed the reports are correct, that there was a high degree of drugs in his system, we are to assume that this probably wasn't the first time this happened. And to what degree did they know that indeed he was using these drugs? That's a question, too, as far as culpability, right?
Sure. You're raising the question of, was Michael Jackson an addict? And I talked to one of my counselors, again, at our halfway house today, and asked him, was he an addict? And he said, clearly he had drug problems. He said, clearly he was a drug addict in some ways. If you look at the record, you look at his own admission a few years ago, where he talked about his problems with painkillers. So you wonder if the family knew about this. And again, if we decide to proceed with the civil trial, will all of that come out?
And the drug propofol, which is an anesthesia. I mean, you take that if you're undergoing surgery. You don't take that to go to sleep or take a nap. So he was under some that kind of thing you used to kill a horse, that kind of anesthetic. So he was on some serious medication. As
an entertainment attorney, the big test is, will you walk away if your client wants you to do something that compromises your morals, your values, and your ethics? Michael Jackson had a lot of yes people around him. Do you think he really didn't know all these drugs were in his house? Or do you think he ordered some of the people on his staff to go out and get me these things so I can sleep? Because the pressure of being Michael Jackson, what the counselor was telling me earlier is like a kid who grew up like he grew up, obviously looks to the stage for his relaxation, for his love, for his joy. So he was taking this medicine to try to sleep at night.
But we all created this monster. I mean, the sad part about Michael Jackson, he never had a childhood. The guy was a star since he was 5 years old, right? Always in the public spotlight. So when does he unwind and how does he unwind? And we've seen he's not the first star to have these issues, right? So many stars end up dying an untimely death, and we find that they're heavily medicated. You're in the entertainment business. To what degree do we know that, the abusing of drugs is a prevalent thing?
Well, we know it goes on every day in our entertainment industry. The question is, will you as his handler or his advisor pull him off the road, take him away, and let them get help as an artist, particularly Michael Jackson? If you knew he came out of this whole molestation trial with a lot of stress on him, should he have been doing a tour? Was he ready for a 50, 60-date tour at his mental state.
We can argue he probably wasn't, but we know that he had deep financial problems too, or at least alleged deep financial problems.
Sure.
And that, doing a 50-city tour when you're 50 years old, that's a heavy load, right?
It's definitely a heavy
load. Trying to make some money.
But I want to stress to your viewers, we don't know who is charged yet in terms of criminally. The prosecutors, the attorneys, the L.A. police team have not announced whether or not Dr. Conrad will be charged.
But we know he's dead, and we know that he died as a homicide. When that coroner's report said somebody killed him, this is not a untimely death, but there's someone who's culpable when they call it a homicide. So now what's next now? The fallout in the entertainment industry. Is anyone really going to care when it's all said and done? Because drugs in the business have gone on for a long time. To what degree will it have some staying power if indeed this happened?
I think, again, if the family decides to do a civil lawsuit, not the criminal side, the civil side, too much damage will come out to the legacy of Michael Jackson. I think in the music industry, we're hoping it will just go away. A lot of people I talked to today, they said, okay, it's a homicide, great, let's move on.
Right.
No one really wants to see another 6, 8 months, 9 months of a criminal prosecution and a civil prosecution, because those of us in the industry, we know our artists, some of the artists do this kind of thing often in terms of the drugs, in terms of the nightlife, in terms of what they're taking to get by, and we really don't want to put the lifestyle of Michael Jackson on trial.
Well, you and I both know it's a business. If there's money to be had, you can bet there will be a civil trial or civil suit without question, because there's an estate there is blame, and the doctor was there, so we know they're going to sue. So at some point somebody will. Hey, the ML King family, the two siblings are suing the other. When there's money to be had, that always happens.
And I'm glad you mentioned that, because I had a chance to work in that situation, and the same advice there was keep it out of court. Court doesn't help anybody in terms of a situation like Michael Jackson. Court only puts his lifestyle on trial.
If you're the family, though, at this point, do you care? He went through the molestation trial. He's already been mixed around and beat up. At this point, what more damage can be done?
Okay, let me tell you. The damage that can be done is you have a catalog that's worth probably $2 billion.
$2 billion.
$2 billion. What are you going to get from Dr. Conrad Murray or Dr. Klein or some of the other doctors' names we're hearing that's anywhere remotely near that kind of money? You might get a judgment, and you might win on moral grounds, and you might say, okay, we had our day in court.
Right.
But you have a catalog worth $2 billion. Spend your time now figuring out how do we exploit, for lack of a better word, how do we exploit this catalog, make a ton of money, and we all can live well. There's enough money here for the estate lawyers, the family lawyers, the grandkids, and the great-grandkids.
That's $2 billion, as you always said. Cut it in half. You got the taxes, you got the lawsuits, you got the debt. All of a sudden, $2 billion becomes $1 billion, and maybe the thing is worth maybe $250,000 with all the debt leveraged against it.
There's indeed a lot of debt, but if they make some smart moves, this $2 billion catalog could be worth $10 billion, Stan. If they do the museum ideal, do some of the movie ideals that they've already talked about and they've negotiated with Sony. Family tour. They've got 150 songs that LaToya supposedly has in the vault that she got out of them. She has some of the songs that have been unreleased. They have the memorabilia. It's easily a way to make money, but do you want to spend the time and put his mother through the pain of a civil lawsuit or even a criminal lawsuit? Real quick, 15 seconds. Earth, Wind, and Fire, one of my favorite groups, performing today, Sunday in Simsbury. Talk about staying power. Quick thoughts on Earth, as we call them back in the day. The reasons. Earth, Wind, and Fire, one of the greatest groups of all time. And for the young artists out there, they're a group that has catalog, so they can always perform. You understand? They've made a legacy, the 70s. There is no band. When you say Earth, Wind, and Fire, everybody knows what it stands for, which is quality, which is great music, a great stage show, and a great catalog. That was real music back in the day. Old guy like you knows about that, right? Old like you. All right. Folks, don't go away. Thank you to our entertainment attorney, James Walker, the author of This Business of Urban Music. Up next, a provocative pastor talks about men and marriage and why he says sex is very important. We're going to steam things up. You're watching The Stan Simpson Show on Fox 61.